Hey there, welcome to Night Lectures, your daily dose of fascinating stories. Sometimes fate cannot be escaped. You can run, you can hide, you can hope it will be forgotten, but sooner or later, it always finds you. In this video, you will hear the story of Perseus, the hero who defeated Medusa the Gorgon, saved Andromeda, and fulfilled an ancient prophecy. Yet behind his deeds lies far more than first appears. We will tell you how a king's fear became the reason for the exile of an infant destined to bring destruction, what was hidden in the cave of the Gorgons and why no one ever returned from there, why saving Andromeda became not just a heroic act, but a turning point in the hero's life, and how, despite every attempt to escape prophecy, it still came true, at the most unexpected moment. This is not merely a myth about a hero. It is a story about duty and coincidence, love and memory, and about a choice that turns out not to be freedom, but the consequence of a thread long woven by fate. Share your ideas for future videos in the comments and hit the subscribe button. New bedtime stories come out here daily. In the ancient city of Argos, among the stony slopes of the Peloponnese, ruled king.His, a man powerful, cautious, and uneasy. His lineage traced back to Lynceus, one of the sons of Aegyptus, and seemed unshakable. Yet as the years passed, Acrisius realized ever more clearly. He had no heir. His only child was Danaë, beautiful, proud, and lonely in her chambers. The king hoped the gods would one day grant him a son. But as the years faded, so did hope. At last, he went to the oracle at Delphi, the most revered in all Greece. There, amid the laurel smoke and the sound of flutes, he asked, would he have a son, and what awaited his line? The answer was brief and merciless. You will have no son, but your daughter will bear a child, and he will kill you. The king turned to stone at these words. Returning to Argos, he could not regain composure. Thoughts raced, fear, anger, confusion. Kill his daughter? He knew that would bring divine wrath, yet to do nothing meant waiting for the death foretold. Then he found another path, to imprison Danaë and keep every man far from her. By his order, a bronze tower was built, smooth and high, with only one opening beneath the ceiling for light to enter. Inside were chambers adorned with carpets and lamps, supplied with food, oil, and clothing. Trusted servants were appointed under strict orders. No one must enter, and no man must ever approach. At first, Danaë did not understand her confinement. Her father spoke of danger and care, of unrest in the land. She believed him, then doubted, then understood. She was a prisoner, and there was no escape. But oracles can foresee fate, not stop it. The gods of Olympus saw all things, and Zeus, not only as ruler of destiny, but as one who often meddled in mortal affairs, noticed Danaë. Her beauty, her solitude, her unjust imprisonment awakened desire in him. The walls were impenetrable for mortals, but not for him. One day, as Danaë sat beneath the narrow opening of the ceiling gazing at the strip of sky, light entered. Not sunlight, but golden, soft, and silent. It was Zeus himself, transformed into a shower of gold to reach her and embrace the one whose life had been broken by fear and prophecy. What followed the myth tells only in hints. Danaë accepted the touch of the god, and soon she knew she carried a child. She prayed that her son would be born healthy and would never know the captivity that was her life. When the child was born, Danaë named him Perseus, a name that would one day be spoken with awe and fear. His hair was dark, and his gaze calm and strong even in infancy. He was not merely human. In his veins flowed the blood of a mortal woman and the thunderer of Olympus. When Acrisius learned of the birth, his shock turned to dread. How could his imprisoned daughter bear a son? The servants swore no one had entered. Magic? The gods' deception? Or had the prophecy already begun? He dared not kill daughter or grandson. Divine wrath terrified him. Yet he could not let them stay in Argos. So he found another way, to cast them out and leave their fate to the gods. He ordered a sturdy wooden chest built, like a coffin but without a lid, lined inside with soft cloth. Danaë and her infant were placed within. The chest was sealed and carried to the shore. At night, when the beach was empty, the guards pushed it into the sea and let it drift away. The waves caught it, and soon it vanished into the dark. Thus began Perseus's journey, not with triumph and glory, but with exile and uncertainty. Fate, which men tried to outwit, was already following close behind. The king hoped the sea would decide for him, whether the child of prophecy would live or be swallowed by the deep. He dared not shed blood but condemned them so that chance itself would show no mercy. The chest was roughly built, its interior lined with straw, the lid nailed loosely for air, yet with no escape. Inside, a young woman holding a baby wrapped in a shawl that once covered her head. Danaë, shaken, did not sleep the first night. Waves beat against the wood, water seeped through cracks, and the wind howled as though mocking their fate. But she did not cry out or curse destiny. She remained silent, pressing the child to her heart, whispering words that came unbidden, calm, rhythmic phrases, a lullaby for him and for herself. 2, 3, perhaps 4 days passed. Danaë no longer counted. The sun rose and fell. Light followed darkness, and her mind blurred as fear gave way to exhaustion. Sometimes it seemed the chest spun in circles. The water supply was small. There was no food. She drank rain that trickled down the lid and fed the child at her breast, praying only that her milk would not fail. At last, when her eyes were half closed and breath shallow, she felt it. The waves grew quiet. The chest scraped, then stopped. A soft jolt. The bottom touched something solid. She lifted herself weakly and understood. Land. She did not know where they had drifted, but sensed it was an island. Soon men's voices echoed, footsteps on pebbles, splashing water. Then came a snap, a pull, and the lid opened. Sunlight blinded her. A cry sounded. By Zeus the Thunderer. A woman and a child. They were fishermen from the island of Seriphos. One of them, strong and calm, reached out first. His name was Dictys. He was not only a fisherman but brother to the local king, Polydectes, a man of ambition and pride. But Dictys was of another kind. Simple, kind, and untainted by schemes. He carefully lifted the child, told the others to be quiet, and helped Danaë climb out once she could stand. He took them to his stone home on a coastal rise where vines twined around wooden arches and wild herbs bloomed beneath the windows. His wife, a gentle woman with thin hands and attentive eyes, laid down the baby, wrapped Danaë in warm cloth, and cooked a simple broth. That night, Danaë slept soundly for the first time since the tower. Days passed. Perseus grew. They cared for him as their own. Danaë regained her strength, walked to the sea, sat under a tree, and watched her son lift his head, crawl, laugh, grasp the pebbles by the steps. Dictys never asked questions. Only once, while fishing, he looked at her and said quietly, I do not wish to know who you are. It is enough that you are here, and he is here. Alive, that means fate has not spoken its last word. The islanders grew used to the young woman and her child. They said she was a foreign widow, that her husband had drowned, that she had survived by miracle. No one knew the truth, and no one pried. Danaë never sought to explain. She lived for what she had. Her child, the morning winds, the calm conversations, and the peace she had never known. Yet the interests of King Polydectes reached beyond fishing and rule. He had already heard of the strange woman brought by the sea, and her son. His gaze had fallen on them, though his hand had not yet acted. And while Danaë believed her sorrow was over, the will of the gods was only turning the page. Years passed. Perseus, child of Zeus and a mortal woman, had become a man, broad-shouldered, sure in movement, calm, yet intense in gaze. He was raised by Dictys, the kind fisherman who treated him as his own, and never sought gain from his divine origin. Perseus learned not only to cast nets, but to listen when others were silent, to watch when others looked away. His mother taught him restraint, dignity, and the worth of a word and a deed, even when they brought no reward. Meanwhile, unrest grew on Seriphos. Polydectes had long desired Danaë. At first it was curiosity, a woman like a legend, beautiful and foreign. But when she refused him, gently, firmly, with dignity, desire turned to obsession. He came to her with gifts, with offers for her son's future, with promises of comfort. Danaë refused every time, politely but resolutely. Each refusal wounded his pride. Yet Perseus was the true barrier. No suitor dared approach while he stood beside her. The young man was admired by all, fair, strong, just, always ready to help. The people loved him, the king knew it. To strike him down by force would make the island revolt. So Polydectes turned to cunning. He announced his own wedding, to a princess from another land, whose name he did not reveal. A grand feast would be held, and every noble guest must bring a gift fit for a royal bride. Perseus too was invited. He had no gold, no silks, no vessels. He came open-faced, but empty-handed. The king had planned this moment. In the hall, surrounded by feasting men, Polydectes rose and said with a mocking smile, "You, son of Dictys, should not have come without a gift. Or perhaps you'll offer me something greater than wine or metal. What say you, Perseus? Will you bring me the head of Medusa?" Silence fell. Some laughed uneasily, others looked down. Danaë turned pale. She knew it was a trap. Medusa was not a mere monster, but a terror sung of in dark hymns, a woman with snakes for hair, whose gaze could turn men to stone. Perseus rose calmly. He felt the snare closing. Not drunken jest, but deliberate challenge. To refuse would mark him as coward. To accept was to face death. He looked at his mother, then at the king, and said, "If you wish for the head of Medusa, I will bring it. You shall have what you ask." Gasps filled the hall, but Polydectes only shrugged. "Since you are so generous, I shall not decline." The next morning Danaë begged her son not to go. She said honor needed no proof where it was already known. But Perseus was calm. He felt destiny's first line drawn before him. He did not know where to find the Gorgon, nor how to defeat her, nor how to survive. Yet he did not hesitate. And when, at dawn, he left Seriphos with only a short sword and a traveler's cloak, none could yet know that this journey would become one of the most famous legends of all time. When Perseus left Seriphos, he knew neither the exact direction, nor what Medusa looked like, nor how to defeat her. All he had was the resolve to keep his word, and the faith that the gods would not abandon him halfway. He walked through lands he had never heard of, questioned travelers, and met with silence, fear, and vague legends in which the names of the Gorgons sounded like a curse. At night he slept under the open sky, alone, trying not to think about how many had sought Medusa before him, and how many had never returned. One day, as he rested at the foot of a rocky ridge, a stranger appeared before him, a lithe youth in a short chiton, with winged sandals and a staff about which two serpents twined a golden wand. He named himself Hermes, the messenger of Olympus. "You are going to seek the one whose name many do not dare to utter even in thought. But your path will be impossible unless you receive help," said Hermes. "Follow me. We must walk trails that are on no map." Perseus rose without a word. They moved through the morning mist, tireless and trackless. Their road led to three ancient beings whom legend called the Grey. 3 gray-haired crones, bodies withered by time, and a single eye shared among them, which they passed from hand to hand. These women were sisters to the Gorgons and kept a secret, the way to the nymphs who guarded the gifts of the gods. Hermes whispered to Perseus, "While one passes the eye to another, you have a moment. Seize it, and you will have your answers." Perseus did not hesitate. He crept close and snatched the eye from a trembling hand when it was still midway between two sisters. A cry, a groan, none of it moved him. Standing before them with the eye in his palm, he said, "Show me the way to the nymphs. Without this eye you will see nothing and remain in eternal darkness." They had to yield. Through clenched teeth they pointed the way, toward wild thickets at the western edge of the world, where springs flowed that had never known sunlight, and where dwelt a tribe of nymphs guarding divine relics. Perseus returned the eye as soon as he had his answer and set out again. The path to the nymphs was not easy. He crossed barren gorges where the wind howled like some ancient beast and stone fields above which no birds sang. But when he arrived, everything changed. The nymphs received him without fear. Their forms seemed wavering as if born of wind and light. They asked no questions. They knew who he was and why he had come. One offered him the winged sandals, light yet strong to carry him over land and sea. Another gave him a pouch of hide, the magical kibisis, in which one could hide what must not be borne in the open. A third bestowed the helm of Hades, which granted invisibility, the power to withdraw from the gaze even of the oldest beings. But the chief gift was the sword Hermes himself placed in his hand. It did not glitter like a king's blade, yet its edge was of a metal whose cold pierced the fingers. Light and perfectly balanced, it made no ring when it touched the ground and never lost its keenness. With it came a shield polished to a mirror's brightness, the gift of Athena. "In this," the goddess said, "you will see the Gorgon without meeting her eyes." Athena appeared to Perseus as if from the air, fully armed with helm and spear, silent and intent. Her voice was brief. "Do not look back. Hold the shield before you, and do not be afraid." He bowed and thanked all who had entrusted him with the god's strength. When he stood alone again upon the high cliff from which the road into the lands of night began, he donned the helm, strapped on the sandals, slung the pouch over his shoulder, and drew the sword. In the shield's reflection he saw his face, not the youth of Seriphos, but a warrior ready to go where no mortal foot had trod. The wind rose. He took the first step into the unknown. In a corner of the world forgotten by the gods amid fissures and ravines lay the Lair of the Gorgons, 3 sisters born of sea and darkness. Of them only one, Medusa, was mortal. It was her gaze that turned all living things to stone. It was she whom Perseus must find. Clad in the god's gifts, he moved toward his goal with care and silence, sure now that he possessed what he needed. From a cliff he surveyed the ground around the lair. At its base stood dozens of stone figures as if carved by a master's hand. But these were no sculptor's works. They were those who had come before. Warriors, hunters, monsters, each fixed in the last posture in which the final look had found them. Perseus put on the helm and vanished from the visible world. His steps made no sound. His image cast no reflection in the water. He climbed down and approached the cave's mouth, keeping the shield before him, his gaze fixed wholly on the polished bronze reflection. The cave greeted him with cold. Light barely penetrated. Only thin bands slid along the floor, weaving unsteady shadows. He moved like a shadow himself, and soon he saw her. Medusa slept. Her face was calm, yet even in sleep her hair, a tangle of living serpents, stirred as though sensing a stranger's nearness. He did not look at her directly. He saw only the reflection, blurred, a wavering line upon the shield's bright circle. He drew closer, his sword hand lifted, steady, unhurried. He knew he would have only one chance. Another heartbeat, and the blade fell. In the dark there flashed a sound, short and pure, like a string plucked to breaking. Medusa's head dropped, but her eyes remained open. In that instant, from the body touched by the sword, sprang 2 beings, the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor with a golden blade in hand. They sped away, through air and over earth, born of death yet not bound by it. Without losing a moment, Perseus lowered the severed head into the pouch, never allowing himself a direct glance. He knew Medusa's power had not vanished. It lived in the dead gaze, in pupils still able to turn a man to stone even after death. Soon, cries rang through the cave. The immortal sisters had awakened and sensed that their triad was forever broken. Their wails were wild and desperate. They raged in search of the foe. But Hades' helm veiled Perseus. He slipped between rocks, unseen and unheard, wary as the morning wind. With the winged sandals he rose into the sky, and the crags fell away beneath him. Above him lay only the heavens, clear and cold. Leaving the desolate lands, Perseus flew southward, over glittering waves, green hills, and shores where people lived who knew neither his name nor his deeds. He did not seek glory. He bore in his pouch a terrible secret, the head of Medusa, whose power had not faded with her death. The wind cooled his face. The winged sandals graced the air beneath his feet, and ahead, beyond the horizon, new lands awaited. Then, passing over a stony coast, he saw what made his heart tighten. By the cliff stood a girl in chains. Her arms were raised, her wrists clasped by iron rings set into the rock. She stood alone among ledges and waves, surrounded by wind and silence. Perseus drew near, wary and amazed. He alighted on nearby stones, removed the helm, and called to her. The girl turned, slowly, as if doubting that anyone had come. Her face was lovely and composed, yet in the depths of her eyes lay fatigue. She named herself Andromeda, daughter of Cepheus, king of Ethiopia, and of Queen Cassiopeia. Her tale was brief. Cassiopeia, proud of her beauty, had once dared compare herself to the Nereids, the sea nymphs. Insulted, they appealed to Poseidon, and the sea god did not forgive. Disaster fell upon Cepheus's land. Waves drowned the coasts. and a monster, a vast sea beast, ravaged the shores, dragging off cattle and men. The oracle gave a single counsel. The king's daughter must be offered as sacrifice, and her parents obeyed. Andromeda was chained to the rock, and at sunrise, she was to die. Perseus listened in silence. He glanced toward the horizon. There already darkened a heaving wall of water, and within it moved a scaly shadow. He said he would help, but first he went to the palace. Cepheus received him in confusion. Cassiopeia dared not lift her eyes. Perseus asked for no reward. He only said that if he saved the girl, he would claim her hand. Cepheus, before witnesses, gave his promise. Then Perseus returned to the shore. Clouds gathered, the wind strengthened, and then the monster burst from the deep, a sinuous body plated with shields of scale, eyes glittering, a maw wider than a boat. It surged toward the rock, flinging up waves and laying bare the crags. Perseus did not delay. He shot skyward and struck from above, sword in hand. He cut at the neck and at the eyes, veered aside, attacked again. The beast howled, rolled, lashed its tail, and tried to hurl him from the air. Once Perseus was almost struck down, but he rose again. At last, when the blade found the soft place beneath the gills, the creature shuddered, cried out, and sank into the abyss. The shore stood still. The water calmed. Perseus flew to the rock and severed the chains. Andromeda swayed, and he caught her. She said nothing, only looked at him, long and silent, as though unable to believe it was over. King Cepheus kept his word. The people hailed Perseus as a hero, and Cassiopeia, her pride bowed, blessed the marriage. The wedding soon took place, not without trial, for Phineus, Andromeda's kinsman once betrothed to her, tried to break the union but was overcome. Having endured battle, deliverance, and meeting, Perseus gained not only victory over the beast, but the hand of the one for whom it was worth returning to earth. He found not only renown, he found love. When Perseus left the shores of Ethiopia, where he had fought the monster and found Andromeda, his path turned once more towards Seriphos, the island that had first set him on the road to heroism. He flew to restore justice and free those who had waited too long. At his side hung the pouch containing Medusa's head, tightly sealed, deadly even without its eyes, and in his heart there was no longer fear. The wind brushed his face, and the island spread below him looked the same as when he had left it, yet somehow different. Perseus knew that much could have changed while he was gone. He remembered his mother, her eyes full of patience and silent defiance. He remembered Dictys, the simple fisherman who had become family. Their faces stood before him clearer than the cliffs he was approaching. Polydectes, believing he had rid himself of the troublesome youth, had secured his rule. He strengthened his power, silencing all who reminded him of earlier times. Danaë no longer left her chambers, and Dictys had vanished from the harbor. Those who remembered Perseus spoke his name only in whispers, as though it had become dangerous itself. But when the hero, with Andromeda beside him, set foot on the shore, the news spread faster than footsteps. They recognized him, in his stride, in his silence, in the way he walked through the city without fear. A feast was taking place in the palace. Polydectes, surrounded by nobles and soldiers, celebrated one of those victories rulers invent to forget their own fears. When Perseus entered the hall, silence did not fall at once. It seemed to thicken slowly, filling the space. One by one, heads turned. The king lifted his eyes. "You have returned, and even with your prize. Well, you have surpassed expectation." But Perseus did not smile. "I did not come for praise," he said. "I came to ask, where is my mother?" Polydectes gave no answer. Behind him, someone shifted tensely. Then Perseus stepped forward, untied the pouch, and slowly, without looking, drew out Medusa's head. Those who failed to avert their gaze turned to stone. Those who laughed froze in poses that would never change again. And Polydectes himself, before uttering either threat or cry, hardened into rock, his face fixed in bitterness and helplessness. When all was still, Perseus closed the pouch once more and lowered his head. Those who survived did not dare meet his eyes. He ordered that Danaë be freed, and when she saw her son, she said nothing. Only her hands trembled as she embraced him. Dictys, now released, stood beside them. The people emerged from hiding, and in the square before the palace, Perseus said, "This man was kind to strangers. He never sought power, but he deserves it. Let him be king. And so it was. Dictys became ruler of Seriphos, a just guardian of order. Perseus never again used Medusa's head. He brought it to Athena's temple and left it there as a sign that his task was complete. The goddess took it and set it upon her aegis, the shield on which the Gorgon's face would henceforth shine, a reminder of the price of courage and reason. Seriphos changed. Those who had known only fear learned what liberation could be, and the name of Perseus remained in their gratitude. After all his deeds, Perseus could have stayed on Seriphos and lived as a hero surrounded by glory and respect. Yet his heart turned ever more often toward Argos, the city of his birth, once ruled by Acrisius, where it had all begun. He remembered not so much the old man's face as the fear with which that man had cast the infant and his mother to the sea, trying to escape prophecy. Perseus bore no hatred and sought no revenge. Yet he understood. The fate one flees still waits for its hour. He wished only to close the circle and look into the eyes of the man who had feared his birth. Leaving Seriphos, Perseus set out with Andromeda and Danaë. They stopped in many places, and everywhere his name was spoken with reverence. People told of his courage, of how he had saved his mother and restored justice. When they reached Argos, Perseus learned that Acrisius had long since left the palace. Rumor said that after hearing of his grandson's feats, the king had grown fearful, certain that the prophecy might be fulfilled now when it seemed long forgotten. He fled the city, living under false names, wandering through the northern lands, avoiding all news of Perseus. The people of Argos, weary of old fear, welcomed Perseus as their rightful heir. Yet after assuming the throne, he soon relinquished it. He passed the crown to Megapenthes, the son of Acrisius's brother, believing the kingdom should belong to one whose life was unshadowed by the ties of ancient doom. This act earned respect and preserved his memory not merely as a brave man, but as a wise one. Time went on, and one day, when Perseus was in the city of Larissa, games were held there in honor of a dead king. The finest athletes of all Hellas gathered, and the hero, concealing his name, decided to compete. He cast the discus. The stance was perfect, the motion precise, the strength true. But a sudden wind rose and altered the course. The discus did not fall upon the field. It flew beyond the barrier and struck a spectator standing at the edge. For a moment, no one understood what had happened, but when they ran to the fallen man, they found an old one. His face was hidden by a cloak, yet his garments and his features left no doubt. It was Acrisius. He died almost at once. No word, no look, no meeting, only the heavy stone of fate flying through the air. Thus the prophecy was fulfilled, not because Perseus wished it, nor because anyone sought vengeance, but because it had been spoken, and the thread of destiny had reached its end. Perseus sat apart for a long time, staring into the distance. He did not blame himself, yet he could not escape the sense that it had all been written from the beginning. He understood that sometimes to flee fate is to set it in motion, and that the most tragic events happen not through will, but despite it. He did not return to Argos. With Andromeda he journeyed farther and founded a new city, Mycenae. By one tale, he named it after a sword he found there. By another, by the will of the gods. Mycenae became his home. There he lived with Andromeda, raised children, and ruled with moderation. From him descended new dynasties. One of his descendants, Electrion, was the father of Alcmene, mother of Heracles. But Perseus himself no longer sought adventures. He knew that heroism was not only triumph over monsters, but also the strength to refrain from defying fate, even when it brings sorrow. His name endured in songs, in carvings upon vases, and in stone where heroes' forms were etched. His life ended not in battle, nor on a throne, but in silence, in peace, in the understanding that everything in this world, fear and courage, pain and forgiveness, weaves into a single path, one that can be walked only by those who do not turn from truth, even when it carries with it destiny itself.